Hello and welcome to Demented Squirrel Crafts. This video is all about squirrels because January 21st is the International Day of Red Squirrel Appreciation, and the squirrel is part of my logo. Because I have ADHD and it's very much squirrel brain, I thought I would combine the two and make a physical representation of my logo. So we're going to do the usual basing. I'll put a link in the description on exactly how we do basing and why we do basing. I have a separate video for that because it's quite long and not long and complicated, but it's in depth. So I just run through this very much time-lapsed to hell because there's just nobody wants to watch me squish tinfoil, aluminium foil for like 20 minutes while I figure out what shape and how big I want it. So you use aluminium foil just to not use lots of foam. It's the same principle as why I use the polystyrene eggs. In this case we're using a 10 centimeter 4-inch egg and two smaller eggs stuck together to make the shape. Now I'm going to wrap the tinfoil in hockey tape because it's a fabric tape. It's really good for the clay to give something to absorb to and grip to. You can use other forms of absorbent tape. I find hockey tape really good, and you can pick it up cheap normally in countries where a lot of people play ice hockey or field hockey. And this is just me adapting it so that it all fits together nicely. Now I'm going to base it all in the clay. So on the polystyrene we're going to do our black, and we're going to poke loads of holes in it in order to make sure that the moisture can escape out so it doesn't form air bubbles and it doesn't crack. And then the clay on the tape shouldn't need too many holes because the fabric is creating that air gap between it and the aluminium, but I do poke a couple just to be sure. Now I've realized that filming black on black is really hard, so there will be a couple of times in the video where I've increased the exposure and the brightness so you're able to see the detail. In real life you can see the difference totally, but the camera doesn't want to do it. So here you go, here's the first exposure so you can see the texture. So you do that texture in parts, you let one part dry a bit and then the next part. And then the body, we're just going to use balls of clay and our ball tool and just make a whole lot of little shapes to look like, kind of like dragon scales. So yeah, a ball and a ball stylus, and you just follow through on all of the shapes in a row, and then the next row, and then the next row, and the next row, and the next row. You know, I was making it to match my logo, and it's going to look a bit like dragon scales. So the idea for this one is I'm going to make a copper statue with verdigris and some detailing so it looks like it's a copper statue that's been left in the rain. Yeah, and so I just continued to add balls of clay, use the stylus, more balls of clay, use the stylus until I had it all covered in the layers of scale and it matched up to the head and it looked like the character icon. So again, a word of warning because you're about to be blinded by the light in order to be able to see it because it's black on black. So there you go, that's it done. Once the scales are dry, then I worked on the head. You have to let the scales dry so you can handle it, otherwise you'll squish everything. So I just added a layer of clay to the head, and then I used all of the texture tools in order to make it look like fur to match the tail. So I'm using a brush cleaning tool and I'm using my cat brush tool just to make it look furry and make it look like the tail so it matches, blended into the top of the scales, and again blinded by the light in order to see the texture. So now we're going to make the ears. So I made a cigar oval shape and then flattened it with my piece of acrylic in order to make it flat and uniform, and then form it a little bit, check that the sizing is right, check that you're happy with the form, and then I just cut off the end because I'm going to put this straight onto the fresh clay. This head is not dried yet, so that I can blend the fur from the head into the ears and make it look all one piece, make it look like the ear is actually inside the fur, texture it a little bit, make sure it's all good, and then just repeat it for the second ear, trying to make it approximately symmetrical as far as shape and size. Again, a little bit of brightness. So for the face, I have to do the whole thing with exposed brightness so you're able to see, because black on black is probably never happening again, because this is so difficult to show on film. Even with the light that I have and how I'm doing it, it's still not picking it up. I'm sure people have a wonderful trick to be able to do this. If you know, please tell me, because I love working with black clay because it's easy to paint. You can do loads of metallics, awesome, but it's an absolute bear to try and film, because it looks perfect in real life. You can see it easily, but on film it's impossible. So that's why this is all overexposed. So we're just going to make our shape, make our oval. I'm using teddy bear eyes, plush eyes for this, because I like the roundiness and the shininess of it. So I'm using an awl just to poke a hole all the way into the polystyrene ball underneath, because the eyes have this stem at the back for securing inside the teddy bear. But you can't really cut it off without a lot of work, so it's just easier to push it all in. So there you go, there's the face done. Once everything is dry, we're just going to paint it with some acrylic paints. So I used bog standard metallic copper paints. I only did one layer on each because I'm doing another paint technique after this. I'm painting them separately because it's easier to paint now than when they're all attached together. And I tried to do this like brushed copper effect using a sponge, but it didn't dry as textured as I would like. So if I do this again another time, I'm going to make the paint a little bit thicker. Once everything is dried, we're going to assemble it together. I made both parts separately because it's just easier to do the foam work and the texturing and the painting of the both parts separately because of all the intricate parts and details. So we're just going to glue them together now and put some permanent fixtures in using some skewers. So you just glue the foam together, make sure it's got a good bond, and let it dry. And then we're going to just use some skewers. I just broke them to size to poke them through the tail into the body. Except this is where I realised I'd completely forgotten how dense tinfoil aluminium foil gets when you squash it together. I could not get the skewer in by hand. I had to use a variety of tools and fight with it until I could get the two skewers in. Also forgot what the camera was. Also wasn't in focus. It was a fight. But it got through there eventually. In the end, both skewers are in, and now it is time to hide the seams. We do this by just adding balls of clay in, texturing it, retexturing it, adding more texture, fiddling about with texture, adding in missing scales, making sure the base is level because both parts may not be completely level, fiddling about with it, texturizing it again, adding more foam. This took longer than half of the other things put together because I was so determined that you wouldn't be able to see the seam line in the end. Basically, I played with it until I was happy with how it flowed together between the two parts. I left it to dry before we did the final painting. You add some more copper paint to it and colour it all in so that you can't see the seam and let it blend. I only did one coat of copper because I'm going to do other paint techniques on top of it. But, you can paint it as many times as you want. Now, I wanted this to have a verdigris, worn, aged copper feel, and I bought this Stamperia vintage paint effect, thinking it would give sort of that washed out, gritty verdigris effect that copper gets when it's been left in the rain. But it's more of a translucent acrylic paint that's like the exact colour. I mean, the colour is perfect, but once it dried, it seemed very dusty and not as nice as I would have liked. And I did 2 coats, so I wasn't totally impressed. And then the last step is just to add some quick dry brushing to all the high points with some copper and some fresh gold so that it looks like it's been rubbed. And that's it. That's our squirrel statue in a red copper for celebrating, International Red Squirrel Day, and part of my logo and my icon that I've used for years. So now it's time for the pretty pictures. It's lovely and shiny. The copper really looks like copper. It looks like a very good metallic. Very happy. So thank you to everybody for the support through Patreon and PayPal. Shout out to everybody who's been super supportive, especially this last couple of months. Thanks for watching, if you stay to the very end, there's a little sneak peek of the next video. Have a wonderful week. Bye.